It's interesting, on this list of manufacturers, the only one that did require a warrant and does tell their customers about demands for the data were Tesla. On both is the only company. But then again, worry about self-driving and the fact that you're in a locked cage by Tesla and they can drive you wherever they want at some point in time, right?
I thought my tin hat was good. Holy cow. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode. It's actually lucky episode number 21 of the Wheelhouse. And today, our panel, joining us, Ashley Cavazos, Marketing Director at the DeMontrond Auto Group, Colby Joyner, VP of Marketing at the Cavender Auto Group, and Savannah Sims, Director of Business and Development at Sims Auto Group. And just to get off the disclaimer out the way, that everyone's views here represents simply their views, not that of their company, who employs them, or any of their affiliates. So with that, let's have a jolly good show where each of us can give our insights so people can maybe get some information from that, or just laugh and be like, who gave these people a microphone? I'm going to start out by giving everybody 30 seconds to do the around the horn. And what we want to talk about right now are what are some of the biggest hurdles you think your stores are going to have to overcome specifically this May, this month? What do you think some of those biggest obstacles are that you guys have on your radar? And maybe you have a plan for them already, but what would they be? So 30 seconds on the clock. Savannah Sims, we'll start with you.
Wonderful. So we just finished out our first 60 days under new ownership. So May is going to be tough, implementing new processes, building a really strong foundation as we're working hard on acquisition mode over the summer. So starting over, cleanup is done, and now building. So that's what we're looking forward to.
Now the real work starts.
Exactly. Get through all those EVs sitting on the lot.
All right. 30 seconds on the clock for you, Ashley.
I would say it really goes back to, we've got inventory levels up. And if you're like me, you're going through all of your new car incentives, getting your specials out, trying to figure out how to price everything. There are definitely going to be some challenges from a competitive pricing and making sure that we're staying within OEM standards. But, it's a competitive market and we've got inventory, we've got to move.
Right. Yeah. Towing the line. I'm sure we're all looking at that right now. Colby Joyner, 30 seconds on the clock for you.
I would say our biggest challenge in May is to continue performing at the level that we've been performing at. We've had the last 4 months, we've had some pretty significant growth when it comes to year over year. And so there's this new standard and we have to make sure that we're continually going there and we can't go backwards. That's not accepted. So it's a lot of pressure and a lot of, focus on that, but we have a great team. So that's going to be our biggest thing in May, is making sure we're going into the summer and living up to the capacity.
Yeah, that sounds like you keep me updated on that. Well, that sounds like a lot is all I'm saying. But, Listen, if you've got a good group of 40 or so people and they're doing a great job of it, then I think that's, that you had a great chance of success there to that. So, all right, so let's head into some of our headlines here. So the first one is we've all heard from either a family member or a client about a car. I'm just going to drive it until the wheels fall off. And the thing is like the math on that has been changing and kind of increasing, and costs of ownership have been increasing. We've talked about that multiple times here, right? And in fact, on the first episode, even the pilot episode of the Wheelhouse, we talked about, it was a Wall Street Journal article that talked about how long it's going to start taking cars to get repaired. And as dealers, obviously, we're happy to both repair your car and sell you a new one. But when we hear things like, I'm never going to trade, I'm just going to keep it till the wheels fall off, there's sort of like a new math that goes along with that. Insurance is more expensive and parts are more expensive. Are you guys still hearing that? And do you think, like, what would be your advice to someone who is in the same situation? Does it actually pay? Does it make sense? Does it math or whatever we want to say about it? And what do you guys think about that?
I think there's a fine line between, the older cars. Sometimes there's a little bit of clout. And I know we talked about this earlier, but having some prestige to an old Land Cruiser, that has like a cool factor to it. And you may say, I'm going to drive till the wheels fall off. Or are you driving an old Prius that now it weighs this much and the battery doesn't work anymore and you're going to drive it till the wheels fall off. It's just not efficient anymore. So as a dealership, I think having parts programs for these cars that are older, because the obsolescence and throughput in the shop, it can really slow things down. So if we're not servicing them in-house, but we have a partnership and we have wholesale accounts for local shops that will do that, and building a community around that welcomes them rather than, oh, we don't service cars over 10 years old, make them feel welcome, but have these programs in place with a local shop, and also the community, do a cars and coffee around it, like make it cool, have ownership events, and build a business within your business to own that, because at some point those wheels are falling off and I want to be where they come to get the next set.
Yeah, I think with, we're not really going to see the big effect of people driving their cars until the wheels fall off for another 5 to 10 years, because that kind of started or happened several years ago. So, what we have on our side is we're looking at loyalty programs, internal loyalty programs, making sure that we're, lifting up our service departments and really kind of starting on the marketing side of really pushing service more than variable, and making sure that the customers that are in our area are understanding that we're able to provide that top tier service for that extended period of time, which makes them feel like the vehicle's more reliable. We're reliable on that, which makes them more willing to purchase from us at some point in the future. But at the same time, to prevent that, we are kind of focusing more on the lease side to make sure that we can get that turn. So it's kind of a double-edged sword.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have to echo you, Colby, in that sense where I even think of my own parents. My parents are driving until the wheels fall off.
But there's that though too, right? You tell them like it's actually going to cost you less if you lease, especially now. Like it's going to cost you more to be keeping and repairing your car, or cost you less to buy. I mean, or what do you advise them?
I mean, that's exactly the conversations we have, because my dad's willing to do it for my younger siblings because he knows like, hey, I want to keep them in a safe new vehicle and keep cycling them out. But then he's taking his Ford to go get, fixed, and it's costing X amount of dollars, or it's needing this amount of work. And I'm like, Dad, like, maybe we talk about, what we're looking to do long term. And I understand the no payment thing is great, but like, how is all of that factoring in when Ford doesn't even make your car anymore and you're trying to find these parts? But from the dealer side of it, you can't go wrong with building that service retention loyalty plan and keep that relationship going. So when the wheels do fall off, like Savannah mentioned, you're that first person they're thinking of, because a lot of times you hear a lot of these people who are driving them that long, they have their, at least in my case, I hear a lot of like their local favorite mechanic shop. It's not so much the dealer, right? It's a local shop. So how do we make ourselves feel that way to them as well?
Yep. And that's and then that, and exactly what Savannah said too. There's, from my experience, guys, there's nothing that says you can't have a labor grid specifically for vehicles over 10 years. Right. Mm-hmm. We used to call it our heritage collection. So that was right. I mean, so there's nothing that says you can't change your labor grid or change, matrix pricing for vehicles that are over 10 years old and make people feel like appreciated and special for that, so that we are, so that those people are still a touch point in the dealership. And if somebody's a touch point in the dealership and they're seeing your new stuff and they're still paying for the repair on their car, then that's all you could really ask for.
And how proud are they when they come in? You know, it's like a badge of honor, that odometer, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And you can celebrate that. Like, look at all the times that we post on, like, we do a lot of social media, but look at all the times we post on social media saying, so-and-so just bought a car. So-and-so just bought a car. Why can't you do the same thing with so-and-so just came into service for the 50th time and has only done their service with us and their car is still running and still perfectly fine. Like that is just as good, if not better, of a showcase of the reliability and the service from the dealer versus hey, we were able to sell you a car.
I don't know if you guys can hear my applause. I don't know, but I'm doing the applause right now. Yes, applause. And right. And that should be something, because also, like, if you're a new car dealer and somebody's coming to you so far out of warranty to do their repairs, and they're clearly understand, like, they look at the dollar signs on Google and understand that your dollar signs look different than the dollar signs from the independent mechanic that doesn't have a website, and that they understand that and they still come to you for service. And to your point, Colby, that would be awesome to start seeing that we celebrate that both for our service departments and for our clients online. And we make that kind of payoff for them in different ways. All right. Moving on to sort of our next article. This one, I wanted to read this like a couple times, because essentially, so Carnation is was a Wichita used car dealership, permanently banned from operating, faces $418,000 penalty for selling 13 vehicles without operational airbags. That follows an initial incident a few years ago where a customer discovered the vehicle they purchased had a deployed airbag, which was not disclosed. The situation escalated when another car found an airbag simulator device in their car, leading to the discovery of 12 additional affected vehicles that were sold in early 23. Now, the dealership's owner contested the claim, stating that customers were aware of the vehicle's accident histories. The dealership does not guarantee airbag functionality, and he does suggest that customers preferring vehicles without accident history should get a newer certified used car from a dealer. The owner also mentioned challenges in obtaining legal representation, attributing it to the dealership possibly being minority owned or at a disadvantage for seeking legal representation during the first instance. So the penalty includes compensation to the victims, along with bulk of the amount covering civil penalties, court costs, and investigation fees. And really, we didn't get too much other commentary from the ownership other than what was provided in the article. So is this a shady dealer in Wichita? Is this a situation of buyer's remorse? Where do we draw the line? I know we all have as is cars. I know we have all types of, wholesale to the public type of programs, but where did he go too far? Or is this a case where people realized that they had a car they didn't want and now he's facing sort of repercussions from that?
I just have to make a note that I feel bad on this headline as shady dealers in Wichita, because I think they're everywhere and not just in Wichita. Right. But, unfortunately, they're the ones who got called out in this sense.
Right. Carnation. Right. But yes. So, but anyway, back to my question, like, is that, is this buyer beware? Is this a dealer that absolutely was doing wrong? Was he not clear about the fact that this was an accident? And here's the paperwork.
I think clarity is your key word in that thing. It's all about clarity. If the dealer is clear enough, or as crystal clear as they can be with acknowledgement forms and discussions and conversations and awareness checks and a walk around and saying, hey, this happened, but you do understand this isn't as is, and all the documents are signed, then I think you can do proper, correct, valid business that way. If you're selling an as is car and you're disclosing everything, but since it most likely was not disclosed to the nth degree, then that's where it looks shady, and it technically is. Like if you're hiding something, it doesn't mean that you can't. They're probably saying, "Well, I didn't lie to them." Yeah, but you didn't tell them, so it's omission. And if you're omitting something, then you're just as much as at fault. If as you were to say, no, it does have an airbag, and it doesn't.
I don't think it kind of goes on both. Oh, go ahead.
I don't think the laws are as crystal clear as they need to be. And I think that there will always be laws as guidelines, but I think we need to use our moral compass. And in this situation, similar to what you just said, it's not clear. But at the same time, if you know and you don't share, is that still considered lying? If you wouldn't put your grandmother in the car, whether or not it has an airbag, it's disclosed, it's not. Personally, I wouldn't. So it all comes down to your moral compass.
Ash, I know we cut you off. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it kind of goes on both parties because it's completely about clarity and, truth by omission, right? They weren't transparent with that information, but also on the customer side, they're looking for a low cost vehicle, and you're going to this dealer. Like, I'm sure they have a reputation, or there's a reason why these cars are getting sold. So it's gotta be on both parties. Like, ask the questions or look at the Carfax. And if you see the Carfax, hey, there's this accident. What happened with that accident? Or confirm these details. I don't think it's right on the dealer side, but I also think there needs to be some communication on both parts. So as a customer, where's that education and what questions to ask when you're looking to buy one of these vehicles?
It's like those dealerships that sell the manufacturer buybacks. And the disclosures that they have. And then the customer then goes and tries to trade it into a new car franchise that is not a part of that group. And it's worth $20,000 less, and they don't know why. Well, it was in a disclosure. Did they understand what that means? Same thing.
Right. I guess my question too is like, these cars are at a particular dealership, and this isn't a new car store, and they make no bones about it, and they kind of have their business model is pretty clear. So how these cars were found, like how did the client find that car that they were going to buy? And from what we know, people look at websites, and they look at a few different cars before they make a decision. So there was an impulse, there was some type of driving force that made sense that I go look and maybe even buy this car. So is it also a case of like a bargain is a bargain for a reason? And what's not clear, and I think that, I don't know. Look, would we sell a car without an airbag? No, probably not. Right. Because it's just like, I feel like a car should have an airbag. It's standard equipment, should have an airbag. Right. But at the same time, there's no mention in here about what the cost difference was on the particular cars they were looking at. And
it's just a matter of integrity. Regardless, it's a matter of integrity. The dealer did not have the level of integrity needed to make sure that they weren't going to get bit in the end. And that unfortunately puts an additional notch on the bad terminology of automotive dealers. Whether you're a new car retail franchise or not, it doesn't matter. We're all associated.
So you don't think, and I'm playing devil's advocate, but you don't think just because client knew it was in an accident, knew they fixed it, but then finds out it doesn't have an airbag, that the airbag deployed. In the first case, it was the airbag deployed. They knew the car was in an accident and they knew they fixed the car, but that the airbag deployed, that's something that they feel like they didn't do a good enough job disclosing. I don't know that you could really say that somebody was completely naive about the possibility that the airbag was deployed.
Well, it's a lot easier to see if there's no seatbelts in the vehicle than if there's no airbags. It would be the same level of dishonesty or lack of integrity if they didn't have the seatbelts were ripped out and they sold the car and said, hey, I showed them the Carfax, or I showed them the auto check, or I showed them the history on the car. You can visually see there's no seatbelts, but you can't necessarily tell that there's no airbags unless you're ripping out the dash. So it would need to be very clear and explained there, especially with, hey, the reason why this vehicle is so inexpensive is because of these items. I want you to be aware of that and acknowledge that.
There's a reason why you're buying a 2015 Lincoln MKX for $12,000.
Do we know what he did when they first came in and reported it?
No, I mean, the newspaper is pretty much kind of just telling this sort of angle of the story. And I think that was my other point, is like the reporting kind of doesn't seem to me to be completely balanced, but, fair point's taken all the way around. I suppose the clients could have asked. What's that?
He could have offered to replace it or buy the car back to avoid.
Right. What his actions were.
Maybe he did. Right.
That's true. And we don't know.
Well, what cars right now out on the street don't have an airbag? Like, what is there a certain year model that started? Is it 1985? Is it, you know what I mean? Like, if the vehicle is past that point of there's an assumptive airbag.
Well, it's also not like they're advertising, like, how there's guys out there that go to break into cars and they steal airbags. Doesn't happen here. They've never been here. Not once, then somebody's like supposed to figure it out from there. But let us move on to a topic that we've covered here a few times on the Wheelhouse about what your car is telling about you to other people, whether or not you like it. So in this latest case, now this is in Congress, and Democratic senators are calling on the FTC to investigate 8 automakers for handing over users' location data with only a subpoena rather than a court-based warrant. The reason that's important is back in 2014, I believe, manufacturers pledged that they would only provide this data underneath the correct circumstances, like a court-ordered warrant that had been looked at and signed off on by a judge. So we're talking about Ford, GM, Honda, Stellantis, Tesla, and then to some degrees, we've got 6 more manufacturers past that. So really, how much do we know about what our cars are telling everyone else about what we're doing? And we all have connected services with our cars. How much do we know about what our cars are telling people, and for what and why?
This is a lot more complex than what this article made it out to be. I think there's obviously a time and place. If you have a child and they go missing, every second matters. So being able to get that, something like a missing persons case, kidnapping, Amber Alert, those types of things make sense. But for something like seeking an abortion in another state, attending a protest, going to AA or NA, or going to church, that's pretty wild. And I think earlier someone had given an example of COVID as well, like going and seeing people. Like, there needs to be a lot more work to this before it actually passes.
I put it also just with another article that was from the New York Times a couple of weeks ago, that car manufacturers have also been sharing driver information with insurance companies. And so now your driving habits, regardless of whether you signed up for it or not, that car maker itself is sharing this information with insurance companies. So who has access to your data when you're in a car? I mean, is this not worth a bit of a larger, like, I know everyone kind of shrugs it off a little bit because they're like, oh, data, I don't really, it's the cloud, I don't get it. But like at the same time, like this is your and your loved one's life, and who controls who should be authorized to be able to get that data?
I think that's the big question, is the authorization, is who can get it, right? It is interesting because sometimes I feel like we're so numb to like the data piece because it's just so out there for us that we're like, we can't control like everywhere our data is because there's so many places that we don't even know, and you hear about it every day with, you know, data breaches and stuff like that. But it is, to Savannah's point, like there is that time is of the essence where we need to find out some locations, but also is it something like a warrant when you're trying to get a search for a house? And now, you know, where is that line drawn on what you need in order to know where I've been with my car?
Yep. I think also that was delayed. I think also like, so here, like I have this little conspiracy theory, right? So I recently traded in a performance oriented ICE vehicle for an electric one, and my insurance went down. And I was like, how is this possible? And I called, you know, my brother-in-law, who's an insurance agent, and he's like, really has to do with just how much, you know, data the insurance companies have. So maybe they just had more on one than on the other. So then if you put on your tin hat with me, I think that because they're electric, that every time they plug in, there's information that's transferred back and forth, right? Because your car can start charging automatically when it's plugged in and various other things. And I don't recall exactly what was in the 53,000 words of the agreement to consent to being able to plug in and charge automatically. So I think that my insurance in this case actually went down because there's more data on the car that I got than there was on the previous car that I had. So because it got plugged in, that's just my, you know, tin hat theory. But anyway.
Well, it goes to the same with our mobile apps with our phones too, right? Like I want to be able to remote start my car from my phone app, but there's all of that data that's getting tied between it as well.
Yeah.
I think it boils down to how much do you care if people have it? If you care enough that you are concerned about whether so-and-so knows where you're driving or your mobile app tracks where you're looking on the internet or all this other. If you care enough, you're going to read through those disclaimers. You're going to read through the sharing of data, you know, privacy messages and all this other stuff. And then you're going to make an educated choice on whether you would like to buy that or like to download that or whatever it is. If you don't, then you don't. And if you do care enough and you don't read all that information, then it's on you.
I was going to let that slide, but it's people, they haven't been affected. People care when they've been affected, and they can understand that. And then once they've been affected and they know that that's why they've been affected, then they care. So right now, the thing is you've been affected, you don't even know, or you haven't been affected, you don't know, so you don't care.
Well, that was something I wanted to bring up was I have had a situation where it did matter where I was, and it did matter that someone was able to find me. And that's unfortunate, right? And making sure that my data is private about where I am, where I'm living versus where I'm working, right? So I have like my work life is public, but the specific town and whatnot is not. But having to get rid of SIM cards, change devices, relocate, like if someone goes through that, they're probably someone that's more cautious about what's out there because it's happened to them. Right. But previously I wasn't as aware of that, and I would hit, location services all the time. Then when you try and backtrack and start turning all those things off and start trying to protect yourself, you realize how much is out there. Mm-hmm. But then again, know someone who unfortunately was stuck in a snowstorm and was missing for quite some time, and they hadn't done the recent update on their Subaru. So Subaru could not trace where they were. They were found, but that's another really good case on the opposite side of I'd like them to know. But I think if a company itself has my data and they don't have data breaches, so they're very compliant, they're as safe as possible, which we know things are still going to happen. Look at what just happened to AT&T, right? I'm okay with AT&T having my data. They have all my data. But Then again, they have a data breach. I'm more concerned about individuals and individual groups that are attacking these companies than the companies themselves, which I know this all kind of started from law enforcement, but it all comes back together to how do we make all of these organizations more secure with data?
What difference is it if it's a data, like we say data breach, we get concerned, right? We get something in the mail that says your information might have been exposed, or an app tells you that, right? So then that's your information's been exposed. When your car sells your information to somebody, you don't get anything in the mail. But I'm saying like the information's gone. It went from one place to another. It wasn't a breach. It was actually, they opened the door and said, come on in and leave a $10
tip. Do you like when on Instagram you get a suggested ad on something you didn't know you needed, but you need to have it?
I have my ad preferences kind of lockdown on Instagram.
Well, that's a bad example, but I do because I don't like having to look for everything, and I like that they serve it up. But at what cost?
Right.
And connected car, do I like going up to the charger and not having to scan anything, and I just plug my car right in? It's interesting, on this list of manufacturers, the only one that did require a warrant and does tell their customers about demands for the data were Tesla. On both is the only company. But then again, worry about self-driving and the fact that you're in a locked cage by Tesla and they can drive you wherever they want at some point in time, right?
I thought my tin hat was good. Holy cow.
But it's so interesting when you have...
But AT&T has to send you something saying we lost your data because we were hacked. That's what I'm saying. They have to notify you that they lost your data. Your car's sending out your data without notifying you. Manufacturers are buying it, or insurance companies are buying it, and manufacturers are selling it, and they don't have to send you anything in the mail saying like, oh, hey, sorry. But like,
and that's definitely like the interesting take on it. Like it's just like when you're purchasing a vehicle and you sign the form that's like, no, I want you to share my data, or do share my data. But that should be part of that process when it comes to our locations and all of that stuff. Do I want you to share it or not? To Savannah's point, I do love the Instagram ads that tell me I need something that I didn't really need. But it was also really interesting because I recently took a trip to Disney World, and I don't know if y'all have been lately, but like your ticket is like your little magic band or whatever is also tied to your fingerprint. So they like finger scan you as you're going through every park at Disney World. And I was like, where is my finger scan going? And as a victim of identity theft, that is exactly where my thoughts go, is like, where is this going? And what is my workaround if I don't want to get my finger printed every single time I go through a Disney World park?
Absolutely.
That same data is being used on all the cruise lines right now too. I know the guy who designed it, and it's pretty wild. They're now making all the locks on the cruise lines like that. Think about data breaches in that industry. Well, international waters.
As the great philosopher Dwight Schrute once said, that identity theft is not a joke. I think fingerprints at Disney are just funny though, just because like Mickey and Minnie have like 3 fingers on each hand. So but anyway, listen. And earlier in the show, Ashley, you mentioned about, we've got all these EVs to move, and we've talked endlessly about EVs. We've agreed on this show before that the way to sell an EV, there's really very few that you can sell without a discount. Primarily, you're going to sell an EV because you discounted it. So then I went and leased an EV, and I'll be honest with you, like I didn't give 2 toots about the fact that it was electric or ICE. And it was because of how much it was being discounted that all of a sudden a car that previously or a car line that I didn't think was going to be accessible to me, all of a sudden became accessible. And so I got into a car line that I didn't think I was going to get into for a few more years because of just how steeply it was discounted. Now, the car is a blast. It's an absolute like marvel to drive. It's complete. It's an absolute ear to ear smile every time I get into it. And I'm so glad that I got to experience the brand through this car, that if it wasn't an EV and it wasn't absolutely up on the altar to be slaughtered and gross for EV, that I would never have even thought about it. Right. So this kind of came up in my head, and I want your guys' opinion on it. Have we ever thought about the possibility that since EVs are pretty heavily discounted, are these actually the best conquest tools that we have, that we've never really recognized it as a conquest tool? But if we look at it that way, might that not change how we go to market with the EVs in our line? Because the price point to get into them willingly from ourselves is so much lower than their counterparts. Does that make sense?
I'm kind of curious to hear from Colby, because Colby did something that I've been interested in doing, which is we've been trying to figure out how to sell EVs, and Colby went and bought an EV so he can understand how to sell it and what the appeal is there. But I know you've been digging into this a lot.
Yeah. I agree with Daniel. Well, not with Daniel. The statement that he said is I do think it's a great way to conquest clients. Now, is it something that we're actively doing? I can't say that we are actively trying to conquest using an EV strategy, but it's a fantastic idea. If I think once you make a decision of I'm open to EVs versus ICE, or I do want an EV versus ICE, I don't think it really matters the brand at that point. What you're looking for is range and speed and, the luxury or not, those kind of things. That's what you're looking for. And there's certain segments like, the truck segment just has the F-150 Lightning. You have the Sierra EV coming out, the Silverado EV coming out, the Ram one or the hybrid Ram. You have all these things that are coming out. So I think someone who is a prominent Ford buyer, for instance, and once Chevy comes out or GMC comes out with their Sierra and Silverado EVs, you're going to have these Ford buyers that maybe owned an EV Lightning that didn't like it very much because it didn't perform in the way they wanted to. Now you can get into a Silverado that has 400 miles of range versus the F-150 Lightning that had 280.
So let me just throw this in there though, right? Because it's like, so Ashley, like I leased an EV, right? So I own one now, but I didn't give a shit about the range. I didn't give a shit about charging time. It turns out that it has decent enough range. It wasn't much different than the 8-cylinder ICE that I had before. And it charges up super fast. The day I picked it up, I drove it down to Lexington for the Cane conference. Never had an EV before, never understood EV charging or the app or anything and it was simple to do it. And the reason that I got it was because I was getting the discount that I got on that car could buy most new Hyundais and Kias. Most.
I first started looking at EVs with the government rebate because I was like, okay, my taxes have been pretty freaking high lately, and that's when I first started looking at it. It wasn't because it was an EV. It was because of the extras that I was able to receive with it. And as long as it got me from point A to point B, I was happy.
So let me give you a parallel example real quick, right? So at a Stellantis store, right? And let's assume that you're a Stellantis owner. And so what you qualify for in rebates, so you can get like a Sahara 4xe or a Cherokee 4xe. The discounts on those are massive. The zero down leases. I mean, this is the way back to a you want to know how to get back to a $299 lease? That's how. So now I'm asking you, so if somebody comes in because they're looking for a pre-owned vehicle, do you now have the opportunity to conquest them because for $14,000, you can pay for the term of a lease on an EV because this is what it would cost you because this is how much we're discounting it and this is how many rebates we have on it other than what the government's giving you. This is what the manufacturer's giving you. So I'm saying like now you came in, maybe you were looking for a pre-owned off-brand that we have. And maybe either the bank's buying power isn't there or the car isn't quite that nice or whatever the case is, nothing's going to be as nice as a brand new car sitting on the showroom floor. So is this not an opportunity for us not only to conquest from other brands, but to show people that they're buying power? Because everyone's worried about buying power right now, right? Inflation is a real thing. It's not going anywhere. And yet we have all of these programs for cars that beat inflation every day if somebody would just give it a shot. So here's the thing is like you were coming in for this off-brand used car that we have. And it's not going to quite work, but let me just let me just give you this option that really with less money and less exposure and more warranty, and you become a new car owner, you could have this car.
It makes complete sense. Like, why wouldn't you want to take that angle with them? 100% agree with you on that piece. I think the struggle is as marketers, like we can do that. We can sell that message. It's what's happening in the showroom and our salespeople bought into that, into the EV stage or the switch? Are they educated on the product knowledge of it that they can actually make that switch to a customer? I would tell you most salespeople I talk to are not as educated on the EV front. They usually have maybe one or two experts within a showroom, if that, but they have to be confident in EVs because we can sell the message and completely conquest that piece, but you need your showroom to be ready for it as well.
And I think above education, it's, you said, are they educated and are they confident? I think, do they have a good attitude about it is stronger than those two pieces, because as long as they're excited and they have a positive attitude, it helps a ton. The other thing is like, who are we conquesting right now in the new car market? It's going to be a younger generation. I was just recently in a Lincoln meeting and they said it was a 33-year-old and it had like a group of a very diverse crowd that they were showing. And it was, well, what do they want? And it's technology. Okay. Well, if you look at every EV, let's look at Toyota's lineup for a second. It's a little behind in tech, right? They're not always updating that, but you go get in the BZ and it has all their new tech in it, where I'm dying to get the new 4Runner, but it hasn't been as updated, right? I got one in 2020 and I was like, it doesn't even have the little lights on the side mirrors. That's crazy, right? It's a little outdated, but you go into any of them, you can have the Yule log, you can watch TV, you can connect everything, you can turn your oven on from your car. It typically is a little bit more upgraded. So it is a good entry point to a brand, not only from the price, but getting them enticed. And then they're going to be more brand loyal potentially over time. But I think it's helping attract a younger demographic.
I think that's the thing, is that we have to be able to show people that like your buying power can get you into the latest technology, can get you into something you didn't think. Basically, it's car sales 101. Your buying power is actually greater than what you thought it was. It can actually get you into this. I will say, on the final note on that topic, what we put in place at our stores, we have a pay plan that's got many components, a couple different components to it, but the base commission that you earn is 1% of the sale price, because we realize that especially on EVs, if we have a $150,000 EV and we have to take $30,000 off of it because that's the market on it, the problem, to your point, with the sales staff not being engaged on it, how engaged would anyone be for a $250 or $300 Mini on a $120,000 car or $80,000 car or whatever it is? Because they're definitely almost always Minis based on what we have to discount them. So now, like, how much do I really? And that car requires just a little bit more in the after sale, right? Like getting your wall box put in and like making sure you're good on your charging plan. It just requires just a little bit more, not much. But when we're not compensating our sales staff for it, we sort of also pay the price for then watching them sit on the lot and then talking to our sales staff about, guys, we have these EVs, they got to go. Like, we telling people how efficient they are and it's like, no. Obviously you want people to know that they're efficient, but I'm just saying, like, let's focus on the fact that you've got immense buying power you didn't think about as a consumer. And now I'm also compensating my sales staff so that they're not losing out when they have to go show one of these that we're discounting because the market says discount it. All right. Moving on to our final topic, because there are enough things that are costing us more and more money, and there's enough worrying signs in the economy that are out there, and we're compiling our list, the Wheelhouse will have, of ways to elevate your client experience that don't cost $1, right? And I talk about this like every time I go into one of the stores. It's the whole aspect of walking somebody from point A to point B instead of just pointing and saying it's over there. Right. Or just standing up and greeting clients when they come in or when they're talking to you. Right. Or no cold transfers. Right. We don't want to just be like, oh, you're looking for Savannah, shirt, ring, bye. And then no clue if you're there, if you can answer, if you're available, if you know who's calling. Things that just elevate the client experience that cost $0, but make it seem like they're in a Four Seasons buying a car. So give me your guys' best tips for that. Things that elevate your client experience that don't cost you $1. Go.
I think making sure you stay in touch with your customer after the sale. So setting reminders for when they are coming in for a service appointment and being sure to be the one greeting them in the service drive, not just hitting them up when they're ready to buy a car.
For me, it's video. Are you utilizing video, right? A lot of times you should be able to have video worked into your CRM. You can use it pretty easily. Are you utilizing video with your customer interactions from follow-up or even while they're in service and they're getting a walk around of their car during its inspection from an oil change? That really sets a high bar, and most programs we have that shouldn't cost anything for you to do.
Yeah, like I think if you're an advisor doing an active delivery is so important, because how many times do you walk past your service cashier or receptionist and there's somebody there who's like kind of confused at their RO or trying to ask them a question, and it's like that opportunity. So if you're not able to your point, Ashley, like we do a ton of video, but it's like, that's a good point. If you're not able to do an active delivery with the client for whatever reason, do that on video and send it to them, because like that's just a part we haven't thought of necessarily that that's where video belongs, but you're right, it belongs everywhere. And active delivery is important, and a lot of times it gets missed. So there's an experience like that would easily be something that doesn't cost you any money to do that as part of your process.
Or post-delivery. Hey, I didn't get to walk you through this because we were running out of time, but I wanted to give you a quick walkthrough of what it's going to look like when you come into service and what the drive looks like, because that can be intimidating, and that starts building that retention, loyalty as well in that sense. But hey, I got a video after I bought my car of what to expect when I get to service.
Colby?
Yeah, I think there's two things. One, kind of what Ashley was saying. The first thing that I was going to mention is as simple as it is staying consistent with how you serve. Like what we're doing on our side, and I will champion Eric Barbosa on this because he just did that with our team. He's our vice president of variable, is bringing in sales associates and service advisors and managers all in different levels from all the stores that we have into one area once a quarter to redo or review our road to the sale, our road to success, and make sure that we're walking through every single process to see, is there anything in this process that over the last 90 days has been hampering us from being successful? And it's not all about successful doesn't mean selling the most cars and making the most money. It's CSI scores, it's customer happiness and sentiment. It's so many different things, but staying consistent with how we're serving our customers is massive, because then you know that when a customer is referring someone, when that referral comes in, they're going to get the same experience that the person that referred them to. So staying consistent, I think, is massive. The second thing, going back to it, I know the bell just rang, but
we haven't paid attention to it all episode.
The second thing is the redelivery. You know, what we're setting up right now. So we set up, and I'm not trying to promote anything, but we have a product called Zip Deal that's in our stores. And so during that wait for finance, they're watching these videos and watching these, the process, and kind of, they're getting shown some things that we do in our company, but they're also kind of going and walking through the process. Here's some packages that you could get for your vehicle from a maintenance or service or whatever, but it goes through all this stuff and makes sure that we set up their radio stations and knows what's priority to them when it comes to what's the most important in the delivery. But then that was phase one. Phase two is taking that data and information and being able to reach back out to the customer for a redelivery and schedule that out, a week, 2 weeks, a month, 2 months down the road when the customer would need it, to go to the customer and actually sit down with the customer once they've driven the car for a month or so and say, okay, you've had it for a month. Let's go back through the vehicle to make sure you're getting the most out of it. Is there something that you don't know? What's the normal maintenance on this? What's this? What's that? And getting that redelivery, we're going to have that as a Cavender Connect thing inside, which is our phase two of this whole communication process. So
yeah, there's a few OEMs that require that. So
yeah.
Okay. So if you guys don't,
it's not a requirement on our OEMs, but this redelivery is an actual, we're going to have people. So people that are going to go out to those customers and make sure that we're, it's service after the sale, which is, it's a phrase that gets said a lot, but not, very rarely executed.
Right. No, I'm just letting you know, because that way, if you need there's people out there that can give you like best practices, because it's something they've had to do as part of their, so you've got like the reconnect is what some manufacturers call it. Second delivery is
Encore.
Yeah. So then you have to, and that's based on a lot of metrics that you have to fill out from that. To wrap up this episode, one final question of also a collection of things that we like to get everybody's input on, but because I imagine many of us will be at ASOTU Con. I know for sure I'm recruiting, walking around with a big sign saying I'm recruiting, bring your talent. And I'm sure everybody is, but what's something that red flags you when you look at a dealership, even if you're just going in there as a consumer or you're looking at it as an operator, and you look at a dealership, and if somebody, because we all have people that call us and they're like, hey, I got an offer at blah, blah, blah. And you're like,
Yeah, I'm gonna go back to, it's hard. I can't hear you, Daniel, because of music. But
it's my dating music. I need my dating music to have this segment. Colby.
I'm just going to go back to what I said earlier is consistency. If you're working at a store that is inconsistent throughout the year or throughout the time that you're there, it's just you're standing on sand. Your house is going to fall eventually. You have to if you go someplace that is consistent and they're concerned about consistency and concerned about proper growth, that's where that's a green flag. Red flags are if you're constantly changing a process that you can't keep up with it. And in the end, you're going to get kind of dinged for, no pun intended, because you just dinged me, but dinged for, not following a process, because how are you going to remember 10 processes in a year?
I think a red flag for me is, does my sales manager get up when I need some help with a customer, or are they just telling me what to say and feeding my mouth?
We're loading lips.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Also, sales
can't
process.
Just stay behind the glass wall. You gotta come out and talk to us on the showroom floor.
Sales processes that are like 17 steps, 12 steps, 15 steps. And it's like, I don't know. I'm undefeated in interviews asking candidates to like, give me all the steps. It's like, we have 5, because we can remember 5 usually. But anyway, yeah, like a 17-step process that nobody really works on. That's a thing. Savannah?
I think gatekeeping, like keeping team members from learning and being empowering and thinking to create their own processes and continue growing as a unit.
Yep, I like all that. I'm adding that to the list. How about also if somebody leaves and like half the dealership doesn't even know about it for like a week? Like
definitely a sign that your dealership just isn't that into you.
not a great sign. But all right, well, thank you everyone for joining us for episode number 21 of the Wheelhouse. See everybody at ASOTUCon and see everybody on episode 22 of the Wheelhouse coming up right about that same time. Thanks everyone for joining us. Thanks to my guests. Thanks to Nathan Southwick and Jordan Cox for helping put this episode together. I appreciate your guys' help as always. And see you guys next time.